The ground shook so hard that my scanner flew out of my hand and cracked against a rock. I dropped flat behind a ridge, heart slamming against my ribs, and waited for the thing chasing me to show itself. For 6 days, something huge had been following my trail across Kessen's Reach, and now, on the 7th, it had finally decided to catch up. My name is Dane Osei, and I map land for a living. Boring work mostly. Walk, scan, record, move on. Nobody warns you that boring work on a frontier world can turn into the most frightening week of your life. I peeked over the ridge, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a Vareth. A young one, they told me later, though it was still the size of a delivery truck, with scales the color of wet slate and eyes like burning amber coins. Every settler on this world grew up hearing stories about the Vareth, ancient predators, silent killers. The reason half the continent was still marked as forbidden territory on the colony maps. I had heard the warnings. I had never once thought I would be staring down one of them alone, 300 miles from the nearest outpost, with a broken scanner and a canteen that was almost empty. It did not move toward me. It just stood there on the ridge, watching, its huge chest rising and falling. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on it the whole time, and when I finally turned to run, it did not chase. It simply followed, keeping the same careful distance, like a shadow that refused to let go. That was how it started, and it did not stop for 300 miles. I radioed the colony that night, hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the receiver. "Something is tracking me," I said. "A Vareth, young one. It has been on my trail since Tuesday." The voice on the other end belonged to a xenobiologist named Priya Nair, one of the few people on this world who studied the Vareth instead of just fearing them. "Dane, listen to me carefully," she said. "Vareth do not follow anything without a reason. They do not waste energy. If it has been tracking you for 6 days, it wants something. Do not provoke it. Do not run at night. And whatever you do, do not try to fight it." "I was not planning on it," I said, glancing over my shoulder at the tree line where 2 amber eyes glowed faintly in the dark. "Get eyes on it every chance you get," Priya said. "Behavior tells us everything with this species. Watch what it does, not what it looks like it might do." So I watched. The next morning, I found my supply case had been moved. I always left it a few feet from my tent, and I always found it exactly where I left it. This time it had been dragged back several meters, away from a shallow ravine that had filled with water overnight. If I had stepped out in the dark, I would have walked straight into that ravine in the pitch black. I stood there staring at the drag marks in the mud, then up at the ridge where the young Vareth sat watching me, perfectly still. "Did you do that?" I said out loud, feeling foolish the second the words left my mouth. It blinked, slow and deliberate, and said nothing because of course it said nothing. It was an animal, a dangerous, unpredictable animal, according to everyone I had ever spoken to. Except animals did not move survival gear away from hazards in the middle of the night. 2 days later, I tried to lose it. I doubled back through a canyon, crossed a shallow river twice to break my scent trail, and climbed a ridge line that should have taken hours off my lead. When I finally stopped to catch my breath, exhausted and soaked, I turned around and there it was, sitting patiently on a rock outcrop above me, close enough now that I could see the pale scars crossing one side of its jaw. Something about those scars made my stomach twist. They looked old. They looked like the kind of marks that come from more than just rough living. I called Priya again that night. "It's not hunting me," I said. "I don't think it ever was." "What makes you say that?" I told her about the supply case, about the river, about the way it never once closed the distance, never once showed its teeth, never once made a sound that could be called a threat. There was a long pause on the radio. "Dane," Priya said carefully, "Vareth younglings imprint on protectors. It is extremely rare, and as far as our records show, it has never happened with an off-world species. Whatever you did, Wherever you crossed paths with it before this, you did something that made it decide you were worth staying near. I frowned into the dark. I haven't done anything. I've barely seen another living thing out here besides rock lizards and wind. Think back, she said. Anything, a nest you avoided, a den you walked around instead of through, something small. And then I remembered. 3 weeks earlier, before any of this began, my survey route had taken me along the edge of a rocky basin the company wanted cleared for a future mining lease. My scanner had picked up heat signatures deep in a cave system tucked into the basin wall, faint and clustered together in a pattern that looked, now that I thought about it, exactly like a nesting site. I had a choice that day. Mark the cave as clear and let the survey proceed on schedule, or mark it as a possible habitat and reroute the entire mining boundary around it, which would have cost the company time and cost me a headache filling out extra paperwork nobody would ever read. I marked it as a possible habitat. I rerouted the boundary. I did not think twice about it because it seemed like the obvious thing to do, and I moved on to the next section of my survey without ever looking back. I never went into that cave. I never saw what was inside it. There was a den, I told Priya, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. 3 weeks ago, I redirected a mining boundary around it. I never even saw what was living there. Another long silence. Dane, she finally said, I need you to understand something about the Varith clans in that region. 6 weeks ago, a survey crew from an outside mining company cleared a basin 200 miles east of your route. They did not check for nesting sites first. There was a den. It was destroyed before anyone realized what was inside it. The wind seemed to go very still around me. How many? I asked, though some part of me already knew I did not want the answer. An entire clutch, Priya said, except for one. Rescue crews found a single juvenile still alive in a side tunnel that had not collapsed. It vanished from the site within days. Nobody could track where it went. I looked up the ridge at the young Varith sitting there in the moonlight, patient as stone, its amber eyes fixed on me the way they had been fixed on me for 6 days straight. It had lost everything, its clan, its home, everyone it had ever known. All wiped out by careless hands that never bothered to check what was living beneath the ground before they tore it open. And somewhere in its long, lonely search across this wilderness, it had crossed paths with the one basin where a human had done the opposite, where someone had looked at a heat signature and chosen caution over convenience, not because anyone forced him to, but because it seemed like the right thing to do. It had followed that choice for 300 miles. It had followed it because, in a galaxy full of species that saw creatures like it as either monsters to fear or obstacles to clear, I was the first living thing that had ever treated its kind like they mattered. My throat felt tight. I sat down on the cold ground and did not try to hide the tears that came, because there was nobody out here to see them except a creature that had lost everything and still had not given up on finding somewhere safe. It's alone, I said into the radio, my voice cracking. It has been alone this whole time. Dane, Priya said gently, what you do next matters more than you know. This has never happened before. If you turn it away, we may never get another chance to understand them. If you let it stay near you, you could be starting something the whole colony needs to see. I looked up at the ridge again. The young Varith had not moved, had not made a sound, had simply waited, the same way it had waited every single night since it first found me. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff from the cold, and for the first time in 6 days I did not back away. You don't have to stay up there, I said, my voice steadier now than I expected. Come down, I'm not going to hurt you. For a long moment nothing happened. Then, slowly, carefully, the great creature rose and began picking its way down the rocky slope toward my camp, each step deliberate, as though it still could not quite believe what was happening either. It stopped a few feet away, lowering its massive head until those amber eyes were level with mine, and I reached out without thinking and rested my hand against the scarred side of its jaw. It did not flinch. It did not pull away. It simply stayed there, breathing slow and steady, like something inside it had finally been allowed to rest. I radioed the colony one last time that night, and I did not ask for a rescue team or an extraction. I asked them to change the survey protocols for every mining lease on this continent, so that no other clan would ever lose what this one had lost because somebody was too busy to look before they dug. The galaxy called the Varith monsters. Older species called humans too young, too reckless, too new to understand how things worked out here among the stars. But that night, sitting beside a creature that had crossed 300 miles of wilderness just to find one person who treated its life as something worth protecting, I understood something the rest of the galaxy had somehow missed. Sometimes the ones everyone else calls monsters are only looking for the same thing anyone looks for. Somewhere to belong, someone who sees them and does not look away.